for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was not until the early 1900s, marked by the extinction of the passenger pigeon in 1914, that the general public began to take a keen interest in the subject of species extinction. This awakening was inspired by the early activism of Theodore Roosevelt, John Muir, and Gifford Pinchot. Next slide after that. Thus, our species, Homo sapiens, became the first and only species to be concerned about the survival of all species on Earth. To the best of our knowledge, the only home for life in the universe. As a result of this now international concern, institutions have been created to identify endangered species and to develop programs to prevent their extinction. In the past century, there has been a marked decline in the number of extinctions as these programs have been implemented. Fewer than 900 extinctions have been documented in the 500 years since 1500 AD. About 95% of them were on islands. In February 1999, National Geographic published a chart showing the 5 major extinction events during the past 600 million years. It clearly shows that the number of taxonomic families of life have steadily increased over this time. They warned of a 6th mass extinction driven by humanity. Number 6 on the graph notes that beetles, amphibians, birds, and large mammals are the hardest hit. I asked the editors, why does the line turn fuzzy at the end? I knew that no taxonomic families have gone extinct in modern times. They replied, but did not explain the fuzziness. The downturn at the end of the graph is purely bogus. There is good paleontology for the 5 major extinctions, during which 50 to 90% of all existing species became extinct. There is zero evidence that any such event is occurring now or has even begun to occur. There are 3 primary causes of species extinction by humans. 1, overhunting for food and purposeful eradication of pests. 2, massive clearing of native ecosystems for food and fiber production. Vast fields of corn are grown for biofuel due to green priorities. Equally vast expanses of land have been converted, next slide and then the next slide, to palm oil plantations for biodiesel. Next slide. The same is true of massive solar farms, next slide, covering land that could be rich in native species. These policies must be reconsidered. 3, the introduction of exotic predators such as rats, cats, foxes, and snakes, especially on islands where this has been the greatest cause of extinction in recent years. The IPBES claims that there are 8 million species, yet only 1.8 million species have been identified and named. Thus, the IPBES believes there are 6.2 million unidentified and unnamed species. Therefore, 1 million of the unknown species could go extinct overnight, and we would not notice it because we would not have known they existed. This is highly unprofessional, still stated politely. Scientists should not, in fact, cannot, predict estimates of endangered species or species extinction based on millions of unnamed species. This is not a new phenomenon. The so-called 6th great extinction has predicted for decades. It has not come to pass, similar to virtually every doomsday prediction made in human history. The IUCN is the only international observer organization in the UN General Assembly specifically concerned with biodiversity and nature protection. My organization, the CO2 Coalition, finds the IUCN findings on biodiversity and endangered species to be far more credible than those of the IBPPS, which are not credible in the slightest. It is quite clear that the highly exaggerated claims of the IPBES are not so much out of concern for endangered species as they are for a front for radical political, social, and economic transformation of our entire civilization. Their recommendation for an end to economic growth alone condemns the developing world to increased poverty and suffering. Appealing to the green urban class, the IPBES recommends urban agriculture and rooftop gardens as part of their transformational agenda. No mention is made of eliminating millions, hundreds of millions of acres of former native ecosystems converted to biofuel plantations and solar farms. As with the manufactured climate crisis, they are using the specter of mass extinction as a fear tactic to scare the public into compliance. The IPBES itself is an existential threat to sensible policy on biodiversity conservation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this subject.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Moore.